Stop writing a CV. All right. Instead, write a master copy CV for your whole career without any particular job in mind. All right. Just do literally a career dump.
All right, we're back for the second podcast now. Did you ever think you'd be recording once again for all young people running around headless chickens trying to figure out what to do at 23, 24 years old?
Do you know what? I didn't. It wasn't part of my plan, but I'm grateful that it was well received last time we did it, and I'm delighted to be back because the more I help, the nicer my life gets. You and I were talking off air. I've had the third person already in the last 10 days WhatsApp me, from my private group, say, "Oh my God, I've landed the job. It's great. It's fantastic." Like, you know what? If we're helping people, then you get good stuff, so that's an absolute delight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously you specialize in the older people, the higher salaries, but it's the same shit, I suppose, if you can get the premises right when you're younger, like the same building techniques, same principles. And then I suppose as you get older, then you just kind of get a bit
It's just more
better at it.
money. Oh no, well, I'm not even certain that because it doesn't take that long to learn. But you're just
Mhm.
playing with bigger numbers. That's all. But yeah, the reason why I focus on the more senior careers, which tends to be an older person, the sort of 45 to 50-year-olds, is just because they can afford my services. It's not got nothing to do with them being older. It's just that if you're on in excess of £100,000, you can afford to ask me to help you out.
Yeah.
If you're on, say, £50,000, then my kind of fees might make you think twice.
Yeah.
I get that, but look, we're here for free. The podcast costs nothing, and I'm going to give away some massive value. We are working on an early careers product that will be an awful lot cheaper, sub £1,000, which will rocket people's careers forwards. And when that launches, I'll let you know. But for now, let's just give it away for free, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's funny you said that as well because a lot of stuff I do as well is kind of career mentoring for young professionals, kind of early stage careers, but not because I know what I'm fucking doing. It's because I'm a couple of rungs further on the ladder. I've just been a little bit through the kind of the process. So we'll just give kind of ad hoc help and stuff. But it's funny because as you said, it's not hugely revenue generating, but it's there when you can and you offer your expertise when you can, I suppose.
There is that lovely definition of an expert, someone who just knows more than you do. And that's all you need to be. Is if you know somebody that somebody else does, and you can share that knowledge with them, that is relative expertise. It's comparative. So and I'm all for that. I'm always learning. There's people who know more than I do, and so on. It cascades down. And I can share what I know, and it helps someone out. Then great. Do they have to be a six-figure earner? No, this is all applicable to everybody. Do they have to pay me? Often not. I do a lot of pro bono work, and here we are on a podcast. And for those of you who want to know about how to really crack the CV, that's what we're going to do today. But this is applicable to a six-figure earner. It is to someone starting out on their career. And some of the formulas we use, you could use if you're a supermarket cashier or the CEO. It doesn't actually make any difference.
Facts. So getting into the actual CV, so what is it people kind of get wrong? What are people thinking correctly? Because you hear a lot of shit online. It's
You do.
2-page, 1 page. Should I put a skills section, experience section? But the fact of this is that there's no silver bullet. There's no one, maybe apart from you, might come down and say it needs to be like this. So as a result, when it's open to interpretation, it can be awfully misconstrued.
Yeah, so let's tidy up a few things. Before I go further, because we're on this particular subject, and there is a second subject, recruiters, that also gets me a little bit riled up. Occasionally, I swear, all right? So we're going to be talking about CVs and CV writers, and you might hear some Anglo-Saxon language, in which case maybe put the earbuds in or go to another room if you've got little ones running around, because you do not want to explain what that word meant. Right. What's the big problem? I tell you what, let's ask a question of the audience who's listening. Hi, everybody. My name's Johnny Walker. If you don't know me, I run a thing called the Executive Edge program. I've been doing it for years, and I help senior executives get their ideal job and faster and for more money without having to sell themselves. And I'm so good at it. It comes with a 100% money back guarantee. There is no sales pitch for that program on this podcast, all right? So just ignore that. But I come to this podcast with a bit of game, a bit of experience, should we say. CVs then. Question. What's a CV for? What do you think is the CV for, Darren?
It is a historical document to show what you've done and what you're decent at.
Yeah, and that's what most people will tell me. It's a sort of audit document. These are all the things I've done. These are all the places I've worked. These are the skills I've gained. This is the experience I've got. That's wrong. Okay. Sorry to break that to you. I could care less how accurately your career has been audited on that document. Your CV has one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to get you an interview. And if it doesn't get you the interview, it has failed. Okay, it can't get you the job, and if it doesn't get you the interview, you can't get the job, and that's game over. All right. So all CVs have one purpose, and that's to get you the interview. And I don't really care how well it explains your skills and knowledge and qualifications and experience. If it doesn't get the interview, then it's failed. So with that very singular objective in mind, we're going to ask ourselves, what does a CV need to do or look like in order to achieve getting the interview? Yeah, I've seen thousands of CVs. I've had a 15-year career in executive search, and I've been career coaching people now for 5 years. I have observed, because I studied it, that there are three enormous problems with CVs, which, if you can solve them, will put you streets ahead of everybody else. And the first one, which everybody will recognize, is this: relevancy. The longer your career goes on, the more jobs you've done, they won't all be identical. All right, you'll gain experience, you'll do different things, your career will go in different directions. Eventually, you'll settle into a sort of a niche. But at some point in time, your career is going to be a collection of everything. What do you leave in your CV, and what do you take out? Do you do a one-size-fits-all CV, just have one CV and send it same CV to everyone, regardless of how relevant it is? Or do you do a ball ache of a rewrite, a bespoke rewrite for every single job you apply for? You know what? The novelty of that's going to wear off pretty quickly. So how do you fix the relevancy problem? We'll talk about that in a second. So make sure your CV is perfectly relevant for the job you applied for, without it being a right faff to rewrite or take a risk of sending out a one-size-fits-all CV. So relevancy. The second one is what I call purposeful language. Now, your CV, along with everybody else's, Darren, and everybody listening, will have a whole ton of information. It'll explain, I'm a manager, I manage people, I manage budgets, I manage stakeholders, stuff you do, tasks, activities. It'll be a description of your job, plus the dates and the employer name and your job title, and that's kind of it. What's missing from that information is, why did you do it? What was the benefit to your employer of doing that? Did you help them make their revenues go up? Did you help them make their costs go down? Did you help mitigate some kind of risk in their business? And that is what I call purpose. And then secondly, there is the performance of that purpose. So if you help them make the revenues go up, sure as eggs, someone's going to ask you how much. How much did the revenues go up when you did your thing? How much did the costs go down? How much, a few instances of risk were there in that particular space? And so you've got those things there to consider. Is, what's the content or what's the purpose and language of your CV? And the third one is structure. There's a gazillion templates out there. That's not what I'm talking about. There is a thing which I'm going to share with you all today, which is going to blow everyone away, and it's called the buyer's journey. Now, this is a marketing phrase, so I'm not expecting anyone to know about it. So if you're thinking, what the hell is he talking about? It's okay, you're not expected to know. All right, but I'm a marketer, and in the late 70s, this concept was created. And in the 80s, when the internet arrived, we were, all us marketers were able to observe the behavior of people online. And the buyer's journey is basically just the order in which you present information in order to get someone to make a decision in your favor. Normally to buy something, which is how it ended up with its name. But you can get a meeting, you can get your boss to give you budget for something. This structure, this journey that you want the other person to go on so that they arrive at the point where they say yes to you, is called the buyer's journey, and you can apply it to your CV. So if you've got relevancy, a highly relevant CV, rich with purposeful language and structured in such a way that the person reads it and comes to a yes moment, I want to get this person in for a meeting, then your CV beats everyone else's. So we're going to talk about those three things today, along with anything else you want to ask me.
Of course. Digging into the relevance, that's fucking very, very important, because I often see in other people's CVs that they just don't match up to where the role is or what they're looking for. And I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say you're a project manager and you want to become a program lead, something like that. It's a big step up for role. You may be capable enough of doing it, but you're trying to show this in your CV. But that person will have loads of shit on there, like that they were an analyst, that they were an intern, that they had all this stuff going down that cascaded through the years back to 2015, 2014, 2013. Now, is that completely irrelevant? And what should you do with all this information? Because you have done it and it's on your timeline. How does that factor into relevancy?
Yeah, the fact that it's truthful doesn't mean to say it should be on your CV. All right, I'm not saying just omit it completely. I don't want you to have gaps on your CV, but you just don't have to, make a big deal out of it. If you did something, 7, 8 years ago, and it's not super relevant to what you do tomorrow, mention it, but just take one line to do it. Don't make the hiring manager, the reader of your CV, wade through a bunch of stuff that's just not relevant to what they want you to do tomorrow. That's just annoying. Look, and I want everybody to think about this when they do their CVs. All right, your CV is not. It's going to be a controversial statement. Your CV is not about you. I'll explain that in a second. All right. The hiring manager has got a problem that needs solving. Okay, they want to know if you're relevant. And the problem with CVs, of course, that your CV is fine, except it wasn't written for this particular job. Yeah, didn't even know this job existed when you wrote your CV some weeks ago. It's a one-size-fits-all CV. Now, maybe you're going to finesse it a little bit around the edges, massage it into shape for this particular role, but you know what? It wasn't written bespoke for this, and it cannot possibly be the case, right? No one's going to disagree with this. It cannot possibly be the case that everything you've ever done is always going to be relevant to every future potential hiring manager. That's clearly not true. Yeah. So how do you make sure that you have a relevant CV without having to do a rewrite every single time, or handing in some sort of colossal term of your career, including all the things that you just mentioned that were done ages ago and not that relevant? All right. So I suggest that you do this. This is the big lesson for everyone. First one in. All right, is stop writing a CV. All right. Instead, write a master copy CV for your whole career without any particular job in mind. All right, just do literally a career dump. The easy thing about that is you don't have to edit for a particular job in mind. You can literally just vomit up your entire career, and you'll end up with an enormous document, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages long. Don't worry about that. I don't care about how long it gets. This is your kitchen sink document, so go for broke with it. All right, it's going to be long. Once you've done that, and don't hold back, because the more stuff in your master copy CV, the better. Now, when you're applying for a job, get hold of the job description or the notes from the recruiter that you've spoken to, or the notes from HR, or wherever you get your information from about the role, all right? And have a look at your master copy CV. And every job that's on your CV that is not relevant to the job you're applying for, just shorten it, all right? Like one line short. Because whilst it was there, it exists, you don't want to duck that, it's not relevant to the hiring manager. They don't care about it. Don't make them read the damn stuff, all right? One line, I work somewhere between date X and date Y doing this thing. That's it, end of. Because it's not a story the hiring manager wants to read, right? It may well be worthy and interesting, but it's not relevant to the hiring manager. And that's the key word, yeah? So don't make them read the details. Every job that is on your CV that is relevant to the job, leave it in full, right? That's the good stuff as far as the hiring manager is concerned. And now your CV is highly relevant, and only took, what, 10 minutes just to edit down? You just went to your master copy and went, that's not relevant, delete that down to a line, and all that, actually, that is, I'll leave that. That one's not. And you can go through your CV and it'll collapse in size down to a couple of pages more as your career goes on. And we'll talk about whether two-side CVs are bollocks or good in a minute. Guess my language, which one I think. But you'll get a CV that is highly relevant. Now, when a hiring manager reads that, every single bit of content on your CV is relevant to them. And there's nothing else that's not relevant. And there are no gaps, because the stuff that's not relevant is just down to one line. Yeah. And that's just beautiful. It took you 10 minutes and you can hand in a perfectly relevant CV. Who here listening to this right now thinks this is a better idea than getting a single CV from a CV writer? Yeah. You can get you can get a highly relevant CV to every single job you apply for by going to a master copy CV, which you can then flex the content of. All right. And send out a perfectly relevant CV every single time. That's the sort of big mistake, is you write a CV for a job, then you end up with a dozen versions of your CV on your desktop. Don't do that. Write one master copy CV and then edit down for every single job in the future, and it will always be perfectly relevant. And that solves your relevancy problem then of what you leave in and what you take out.
Should you always be looking then at the job description to find like what's the most valuable elements? So let's say if it is, let's use a project manager role that was in Facebook or Amazon or Google, there'd be a lot of commonalities between them, a lot of things that are consistent themes, and then you're trying to keep that kind of consistency. Does that form the basis, of how you write the CV as well? If they're looking for certain criteria.
Yeah, I think that the number one question, and we'll talk about this now, is whenever I speak to anybody about their job. So when I was in executive search, I'd speak to a hiring manager. They'd say, "Johnny, can you help me hire a blah?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Here's the job description." I'd read it. Normally, it would be a dog turd of a document, and it'd say, "We require 10 years experience. We require a BSc in widgets. Yeah, we want 10 years experience of widgets. We want a BSc in widgets. Must have knowledge of widget 2.0, etc." Like, fine. This isn't the important stuff. What I want to know from the hiring manager is, what do you want the person to do with their 10 years knowledge of widgets? What do you want them to do with their BSc in widgets? What do you want them to do with their knowledge of widget 2.0? And they're like, oh, well, we want them to reduce our costs. Basically, what this does is this automates a load of manual processes, Johnny, which means we can do it with technology, which is cheaper than people. And quite frankly, there's fewer mistakes, and overall our costs are going to come down by, if it was an investment bank, per se, it might come down by 2 million quid. Right. So you want the operating cost to come down by 2 million quid by replacing manual labor with technology. Yeah. Right. Why didn't you fucking say that on the job description? All right. Because there'll be two things there, excuse the language, but there are two things there. One is that there is somebody out there who can tick the boxes of this, but doesn't want to work as hard as is necessary to reduce your operating cost by 2 million quid. But because they can tick the boxes, you're going to end up with them in your candidate pool and interview them. And you might even hire them because they can tick the boxes, and then you'll end up with somebody who doesn't work that hard. And a year later, you'll end up firing them because they didn't want to do the job and you'd have missed your operating cost reduction target. There are other people out there who can produce an operating cost reduction of 2 million quid with their eyes shut, but they've only got 8 years experience instead of 10. They didn't do a degree. And the last time they used widget, it was at widget 1.8. And you're going to exclude those people despite the fact they can deliver a result, because what you specified was inputs for a job that you're going to measure on outputs, which is borderline insane in my opinion. So if you're applying for a job, ask yourself the question, what do they want me to do with the things they're asking for? And if that's not clear, ring them up and find out. Must be a product marketer, must be a project manager in product marketing, must have 5 years experience of this, must have knowledge of product. Why? What do you want me to do with it? Oh, we want to get product to market faster. What's the benefit of that? Well, it means we'll be able to sell more of it. How much more? About £1 million worth. Right. So you want me to help speed up the revenue by £1 million by doing my magic in product? Yeah, great. It wasn't on the job description. Oh, so now you found that out. You can then use purpose and performance language on your CV. So where it says on your CV, I did product management at Acme company for 3 years, put down the why, which enabled revenue growth of X. Revenues as being the purpose, X being the performance, might be £1 million. And that little bit there, that purpose and performance, revenues up by £1 million, that will stand you out from everybody else who's also got product management, knowledge of widget 2.0, etc. Because that's how you get the interview. Everybody's going to be the same at interview. They can all tick the boxes, but one candidate's going to put themselves down in the chair and say, and I can help your revenues go up by £1 million, or whatever it is they wanted. That candidate gets the job. And so that purpose and performance of the job is what you need. When you're looking at a job description, there's only ever 3 things that bother a hiring manager, and they're probably only looking for one of them at any one time. And those 3 things are revenue, cost, and risk. All right. All businesses do that. When you drew a business as a kid, it was probably a factory. In the front door, there was revenue, and you tend to be your product marketing salespeople hang around there. In the middle of the factory, there was all operations and messiness. We call that risk. And at the back door, there's cost, and finance and IT tend to hang out there, and they control costs. So if you can bring money in the front door and not let too much money go out the back door, then you get to keep the result, which is profit. And along the way, you've got to manage all the processes, all the risk. And so that's it. Your job, and Darren, you're in product, right?
Yeah, product manager.
Yeah. What is the point of you doing your job? Why are you a product manager?
I would have said it's just to build like products that are good and people want to use, but obviously like the answer to this now is like to generate revenue by onboarding new users and by getting more transactions, I presume, and by having that output.
You contribute to revenue generation. You're not the sole reason for it, because marketing have a hand on that and sales have a hand on it. But product, you might say you lead the product management contribution towards the revenue enablement of X, whatever it is the company's doing. You can't possibly say you were personally responsible for it. You didn't superhero, put a cape on and stick your pants on the outside and say you were the only person in charge of revenue. That's clearly not true. But you can say you led the product contribution towards it. That would be fair. And now I've got you and 3 other product managers sat in front of me, and they all say, I do product, I do, I've got all the skills, knowledge, qualifications, experience. But one of you has got purpose, which is it was to enable the company to make revenues and performance by X millions. Well, I'm hiring that person, even if they were the most expensive. Yeah. So revenue, cost, and risk. Work out what the benefit of your job is. All right. And then you can articulate it. Now I'm going to share something magical with you right now. There's a little piece of data that we got from Google. There's a wonderful, wonderful man called Laszlo Bock. You can look him up. He wrote the book Work Rules, and he used to be the global head of operations at Google. His actual job title was SVP of People Operations, but basically he was the top dog in HR. And he was a bit cheesed off with Google's hiring performance because it was no better than anyone else's, which kind of annoyed him because they're Google, they're an enormous brand company. If you're a B-list candidate, you don't even bother to apply to work at Google. You know you're never going to get the job. So if they're only getting A-listers apply for working at Google, how come their hiring performance is average? This is just annoying. And so he did what Google do best and chopped the whole thing up, did all the CVs and job descriptions up into their component parts, chopped them all up, flung them into a data hopper, analyzed them, and then, bless him, published the results. This is 6-7 years ago now. And I'm a data freak because I'm in marketing. So I ate that up with a spoon. And now he was helping out the hiring manager and I help out the job seeker. So we had to quickly reverse engineer that data, not very difficult. And we observed this. Everybody's very long on what they do, how you do your job. Everybody's short on why you do your job and how much the benefit was. So we created a formula to fix that. And it's this. We call it the 5P formula. All right. Because it's got 5 words in it that all begin with P, which makes it easy to remember. I help person, right, that's the first P, at place, which is the second P, achieve purpose, which is the third P, as measured by performance, which is the fourth P, by doing process, which is how you do your job. And so your person is the job title responsibility of the hiring manager. So for you, Darren, it might be the head of product. Yeah, you're a product manager, you probably report into a head of product, for example. Yeah, so I help the head of product at a place. For you, it'd be retail financial services company. That's the kind of generic way of describing the kind of environment you work in. So I help the head of product at retail financial services achieve. Now, what's the point of your job? Well, we just discovered that actually in products, generally it's about revenue. Building good products that customers want to buy faster and more accurately, so they buy more of it more quickly. That's about revenue, isn't it? So I help the head of product at retail financial services enable revenue growth. This is what you do. As measured by, I'm not going to ask what revenues are at Revolut, but I imagine it's a 7-figure sum. So we can certainly say about in excess of £1 million. So I help the head of product at retail financial services companies enable revenue growth in excess of £1 million by leading product management effectively, which is kind of a very glib summary of your job. Yeah. Person, place, purpose, performance, process. And if your CV is rich with that language for all the jobs you've done, it's very, very difficult to ignore you as a candidate because the benefit of hiring you, as opposed to the skills, knowledge, qualifications, experience of hiring you, is writ large. Yeah. I don't need to know exactly how much revenue you made, and quite frankly, you may not even know. That number might have been held by your boss's boss and not visible to you. You don't need to know. You just need to know what it can't be less than. If I was to ask you right now, exactly how much revenue did Revolut generate as a result of great product management, you're going to, Johnny, I have no bloody idea. There's no way I can stick a number on that. But what you can do is say that they make what is Revolut's turnover? Is it hundreds of millions or billions?
Say hundreds of millions now at this stage.
Hundreds of millions. Hundreds of millions. The chances are that good product probably increases their revenues year on year by no less than 5%. So £5 million. So if you were conservative, which is what I urge everyone to be when it comes to the numbers, you would just say in excess of £1 million. The likelihood is the reality was it was colossally more than that, possibly even 5x that. But the point's been made. It doesn't need to be more accurate than that. If you can help me enable my revenues by more than £1 million, I'm going to hire you because that's you're a walking ROI. So,
and it's kind of the insight as well, like as in you're providing that insight, so like you're thinking in terms of revenue. So you may not get the number right if it's in excess of £1 million, all great, whatever, happy days. But you don't need to get like the actual figure completely correct. And like it's funny when you said process at the end because everyone focused on process first. And I actually was speaking to someone at the beginning, before we called this morning, and I was saying that look, your CV is all built around what you do, but like the assumption is everyone knows what you should do. Everyone should know how you do your job, but it's all about the output of that and be able to convey it and wrap it up in a nice story. But like I think what's really cool is the fact that like no one is thinking down this lens. So if your CV is built around that, I suppose, and especially from the revenue side or the cost side, I just think it's a differentiator, and I think people may have put it in at their intro. People may have put in that, and I kind of want to get to that stage as well in terms of like how should that kind of be structured and whatnot. But they kind of usually do a framework around that, and then they forget that and just go verb. This is fucking what I do on a day-to-day basis.
You'd be amazed, Darren. I see C-suite executive CVs. I am the COO. I manage 5 departments. Operations, technology, finance, HR, etc. I've got 2,000 people who report into me. Blah 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 blah. Nowhere in that statement is the benefit to their employer of them doing that thing, or the quantity of that benefit. could I just ask you, why bother to be the COO? Why not just not have one? He said, well, because, the business is growing to a halt. I'm like, how much revenue are you sustaining? He said, Johnny, we're $1 billion business. I'm like, so without you, that $1 billion would grind to a halt because ops, IT, HR, and finance wouldn't know what they were doing. I'm like, well, yeah. So at the very least, you're maintaining $1 billion revenue curve. Yeah. It doesn't say so on your CV, son. I'm like, oh. You want to be of value to someone, be of value.
You can't assume it as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As in, like, it's funny you said this. I was literally saying this morning, being like, your CV, you can't like let things have like assumptions. We can't just assume that you did a good job. Obviously, if you worked at like Goldman Sachs, we need to presume that you're not stupid. We need to presume that you're really good at what you do, and we need to presume that you did a lot of good stuff. But you also need to convey it that you were in Goldman Sachs doing great stuff. If you're on, I don't know, whatever trading desk or whatever middle office element of it.
Doesn't matter. If you don't spell it out, you're going to get beaten by the candidate that does. And if you think we're talking very senior language here, let me dive right down to the other end. Imagine I'm the manager of your local supermarket, and I've got a checkout cashier's vacancy, right? Minimum wage. And quite frankly, all I need is for them to have at least 12 months experience on a till anywhere else. And if they've got some knowledge of the particular kind of till software that we use, that would be great. And really beyond that, I don't really care much else because it's a checkout job, need a lot of criteria. And I've got 3 people who applied for the job, and they've all got 12 months experience of using this particular software at another supermarket somewhere else, and they're all on budget. They're all minimum wage. Great. So I'm going to bring them all in. And, do you know what? No one drops the ball at interview. They're all perfectly affable, personable people. They're available immediately. They're on minimum wage. They've demonstrated knowledge of the software. And clearly, from just talking to them for half an hour, I believe they have the experience of being a supermarket checkout cashier. And then the third person plops themselves down in the chair. And I say, great. Can you talk to me a little bit about yourself? And they'll say, yeah. In my last job as a supermarket cashier, I helped that supermarket generate an additional £100,000 of revenue just from my till. We had 13 tills, and I trained everybody else up on how to do it my way. And we ended up making a 7-figure additional sum by being a checkout cashier. And I'm like, did you know? Explain that to me. And then it goes on that they'd studied, this one person had worked out that they get through about 35 customers an hour doing checkout. And by just rearranging how they did it, he was able to get through 37 customers an hour. So for every 8-hour shift, he was getting through an additional 16 customers, times the basket size, times the profit on that, times a year, times 13 people. And, the maths was pretty easy to do just by easing up the checkout flow rate a little bit, because all he was doing was just getting the bags ready in advance and just getting through 37 customers instead of 35. Nothing major to it. He said, but I'm not available for a week because I'm going on holiday. And when I get back from my holiday, I'm going to want minimum wage plus an additional £2. So he's not available straight away, and he's the most expensive. But guess what? I want him. I want this checkout cash, because it's the same thing. They're going to sit there and process food with barcodes and stuff them in carrier bags. The job isn't going to change, but there's something there about the purpose of this job, increasing the turnover of the store, and the quantity of that purpose turns out across all the cashiers could be over £1 million that I like the sound of. And guess what? Despite the fact he's going to be the slowest to start and the most expensive, he's still going to get offered the job, because the purpose and the performance of the job was understood. If you go to someone and plonk yourself down and tell them that, you win, because everybody else is going to be knowledge, skills, qualifications, and experience, and that's pretty much everybody being interviewed, because they wouldn't have got the interview otherwise. So there you go.
Yeah, completely agree. Do you want to get into the structure? I think that's going to be an interesting element. So I see a lot of shit online that says, one page less than 2 years experience, 2 page after 2 years experience, and then I see things that say we need a intro, professional experience, we need your education, and we need like additional info where you say you play squash at the weekend. So what's your thoughts on that?
Right. Let's first dispense with the myth about the 2-page CV. It's utter bullshit. The reason why hiring managers, and particularly recruiters in HR, want a 2-page CV is because most CVs are shit. And they may as well read, seriously, they are. And they may as well read short shit as long shit, right? So if they can't get you to make a better quality CV, they may as well get you to make a shorter quantity CV. It makes their lives a lot easier, all right? If you're crap at writing CVs, just write me a 2-page one. But if you can solve the quality issue, which actually turns out to be a relevancy issue, you can hand in a 3-4-page CV, particularly at my level what the people I coach have got enormous careers. You can't possibly cram it onto 2 sides. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, do not hand someone a 4-page CV if it's just full of junk, right? They're not going to thank you for that. But you know, you hand them in a 3 or 4-page CV and it's richly relevant and full of purposeful language, they'll love you for it. You and I will sit down and read a John Grisham book with 300 pages and not moan about the fact he couldn't cram it into a 2-page summary, right? You have no problem reading 300 pages of pure quality, right? So it's not that the reason why the quantity solution is out there, 2 pages only, is because they can't get a quality solution going. But if you can solve the quality solution, you can hand in more pages. So I think solve the quality solution. Don't worry about the quantity. It's a non-issue. All right. If you can't solve the quality issue, quite frankly, you're not going to get the job with a 2-page CV either. So it doesn't really matter. So 2-page CVs, bullshit. Quality though, critical. That's relevancy. That's purposeful language. We just discussed both of those. Now, what you really want your CV to do is motivate someone to take the next step, which is to call you in for an interview. Yeah. What motivates a hiring manager to say, yep, now I've read this CV, I want to get this person in and meet them? How do we make sure they feel like they should get you in for an interview? And that's a thing called the buyer's journey. Yeah, and I talked about it earlier. I didn't invent this; it came out in the 1970s, but it's a big deal. All right, it's got its own Wikipedia page. People have done PhD theses on it. This is a thing. All right, it's how people buy. It's the psychology of buying. All right, and I study this a lot because I'm a digital marketer. That's what I do. All right. And it sounds a bit like this. It's got 8 steps to it. The first step is audience. Are you sat in front of the right person? Look, if you're being called in for an interview, you can dispense with that because clearly you are. All right. So you haven't got to solve that problem. The next step is problem. Do you understand the problem of your buyer? In this case, the hiring manager. The next step after that is pain. Do you understand the pain that is being caused by the problem? Yeah. How does the buyer feel about their situation? Are they pissed off? Are they angry? Are they disappointed? Yeah. Then the next step is transformation, which is just a posh word for how will their lives change. So do you understand how much better their lives would be or their business would be if you solved the problem and made the pain go away? Yeah. How good does life look like at the end of the rainbow? This is basically the journey they need to go on psychologically, because if they can solve their problem, if they can make their pain go away, if they can imagine what their life would look like at the end of that process, then they're much more likely to want to go on it, right? Particularly if you allow them to paint that picture themselves, right? So if I was to sit in front of you, Darren, and say, I can do a thing for you. It's going to cost you 50 grand. Tell me what your problem is. Tell me how much pain that's causing you. If that problem and pain is worth 50 grand to you, and you can see that the problem goes away and the pain goes away, and your life will be, transformationally better as a result of me doing my magic, then you'll pay me the 50 grand. It's as simple as that. So problem, pain, transformation. Then education. Education is the bit that's in most interviews already. All right. Why do they have that problem? What's stopping them from solving it? Why are they in that hole? Is it a technology gap? Is it a resource gap? Is it a budget gap? What's basically missing from their tool bag that you can bring to the party? All right. So that's quite tactical. The next step is authority. And that just answers the question, why you? They're likely to interview more than one person. So why you in particular? All right. The last bit after that is social proof. You and I, when we buy stuff online, we are trained to look for social proof. We buy something on Amazon, have a quick check of the star rating. All right. We're going to book a meal for a restaurant, which I'll look at the reviews. Everybody looks at what other people who have made the same decision that you want to make, what they thought about having made it afterwards. It's called social proof. And so if you can get those elements into your interview, problem, pain, transformation, education, authority, social proof, then right at the end, you can do the very final step, which is the call to action. And the call to action is just basically the opportunity to buy. It's basically the verbal equivalent of the click here, download here, buy now button online. Yeah. Once the hiring manager has read everything on your CV that is relevant, they've read everything that's got purpose and performance language, and it was all served up in the structure of the buyer's journey, then you must give them an instruction to buy you, or at least contact you for an interview, which is what the CV is for. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So now,
sorry, just to dig into the actual pain, or sorry, firstly, actually the social proof element, does that come from a combination of your employer previously, as well as your kind of online brand, your personal brand?
No, social proof on a CV is nothing more than what you and I used to call a reference.
Oh, okay.
It's basically, that's why my former boss, Darren, said, fuck Johnny did his thing now because we're delighted or something. It's basically just a literally one paragraph long, 2-3 lines long reference. And you can basically go onto LinkedIn and message people that you used to work with and ask them for a reference, and then pick off one or two choice ones from there and cut and paste them onto your CV. Yeah. So once the hiring manager's read everything that is relevant and purposeful language, and served up in the buyer's journey structure, then you've got to give them an instruction to contact you. Now, how many people listening to this podcast right now have got their personal details, your name, your address, your telephone number, your email address, somewhere else other than the bottom of the last page? I bet you've all got it at the top of the first page. Guess where the reader of your CV finishes reading? Bottom of the last page, right? They've just read everything. They love it. Yeah, I'm going to get this person in. And there's just no instruction there at the end. Nothing. So you need a box. The very last box on your CV should be a box labeled contact me, not personal details, not contact details, but contact me. That's the instruction. Yeah. Box labeled contact me. And in there will be your email address and telephone number. Yeah.
Would you not have it on top at all then?
I might also have it on the top, just because sometimes people do close the CV and go back to page one, but mostly I would put it at the bottom.
I actually have a question for you on that as well. So, backstory: when I was in London, I remember I had a guy who was actually a good mentor. Went through my CV, real nice guy, and he said something really fucking interesting. He said, like in the contact details, that a lot of people have their address on it.
Yeah.
Okay. And he was like, get rid of the address.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant. And then I remember saying, I was like, why is it? And he was like, he gave an example. And he was like, if your address is West London, someone could open up the CV and be like, oh, posh prick. Then another person can also open it up and say, oh, entitled, won't work hard, won't work as hard. And similarly, you go to East London and it'll be the flip. So he was like, it never works in your advantage. He was like, it can only be a disadvantage. And then ever since I've taken it out of my CV, and I never had it in, and I also advise other people, but I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. I think you've had a great piece of mentoring there. Your email address and your telephone number, if they want to contact you, they'll use one of those. They don't need to care what postcode you're in. It's irrelevant.
Especially with work from home as well, because like, let's say if they were like, oh, let's try to bring it back in the office, and then it turns out that you're in fucking Scunthorpe.
Yeah. If it's remote working, it's relevant. But even if it's not, you're not going to apply for a job you can't, travel to. So what postcode you're in is kind of a non-issue. But definitely your email address and your telephone number in a box called "Contact Me." And at the end, they'll get to that point and go, "Yeah, I do want to contact you." And hand presto, there's the bloody contact details. Great. So I'll use those. So it's once they're in the mindset, right, give them an instruction. Right. If you're online, if you're on a web page, you're like, "I love this stuff. I want to buy this stuff," and there's no button to click. There's no buy now button. How do I do it? You're rummaging around. After a while, you're like, oh, fuck it, I'll just go get somewhere else. You've got to give them the buy now button, all right? Which in your case is the contact me box, so that you end up with the interview. Yeah. Now that CV writers do not know about the buyer's journey, it's a marketing thing. Nor will they help you avoid a single one-size-fits-all CV, because that's all they can sell you is one CV. And I'm not beating them up about that, all right? But I am beating up on CV writers because they know that a one-size-fits-all CV doesn't fit all, right? It doesn't work. They know it, I know it, you know it, and they're happy to take your money anyway. And I think it's a crappy way of making a living, in my opinion. So I'd be interested to, and I know you get feedback on your podcast, who believes that a CV writer who cannot deliver anything more than a single one-size-fits-all CV, which we now know doesn't work, even if it's a bit better than one you've already got, which also doesn't work, do you now believe that they're wasting your money? And instead, if you solve the problems of relevancy, a purposeful language and structure, you can't be beaten. I know it's a bit of a leading question because I coach this for a living, but there you go.
No, that makes sense, because even if you did have clients yourself, like you did a one-to-one coaching, like you wouldn't be like, give me your CV and I'll just do you one. What you'll do is you'll go figure out what they want, you'll figure out the match they want to go to, and then you'd be over time tailoring it and making it better and better. This one size fits all is just kind of bullshit, to be honest. It doesn't work. But it's the same with a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? Like if you were to put up like a podcast and make it very generic, no one's going to listen to it. If you go for the ocean, no one's going to listen. So we're super, super niche as it is here, and that's why that's why it works. And that's the same with a lot of things, especially CV.
Cool. So there you go. There's my three big elements to a CV: relevancy, purposeful language, structure. I've kind of pissed on CV writers' parades a little bit. There's a 5P formula in there. So replay this podcast and lift that out. That's going to help you out. And it doesn't really matter whether you're a supermarket cashier or the CEO. It's all the same. You know, it's,
Yeah.
you win.
I wanted to ask a couple questions on the order and
Mm.
sometimes like the intro. So like,
Yeah.
let's say an intro section, should it be there number one? And if it is there, what should you capture?
So a bit like an email subject line will encourage you to either open the email, or if it's a bit crap, you won't bother. Yeah. And normally you delete most emails, but occasionally there's a good subject line that catches your eye and you want to go and read the rest of the email. What we call an executive summary. It's basically the very first thing underneath your name at the top of the CV. The executive summary, that is a must. All right. Because that's your email subject line. That encourages them to read the rest of the CV. And that box contains nothing more in it than the 5P formula. Yeah. So
Mhm.
you can put a little bit of language around it just to make it readable rather than formulaic. So if it was you, Darren, your executive summary would read something along the lines of, I look forward to continuing to help heads of product at retail financial services companies enable revenue growth in excess of £1 million by contributing or leading product management effectively. That alone tells me whether or not you are relevant to me at the scale I want you to solve my problem, whether I should read the rest of your CV. And if I do, then you're away.
Mhm.
The thing that I would ask everyone to notice about that is it is a forward-looking statement. Yeah, I look forward to continuing to help heads of product do something in the future. Yeah, it is not a backward retrospective of your highlights of your career, which you did for someone else somewhere else back in the day, which is of no relevance to the hiring manager. That is not their problem. All right. Their problem is
Mhm.
something that they need solving tomorrow. So make it a forward-looking, how I can help you next statement, rather than a backward-looking, look at what I did in the past statement. Yeah.
Mhm. Another question I have on that is when you make that CV and make it all glossy and perfect,
Mm.
should you lift and shift that into LinkedIn afterwards? So let's say if it's under Revolut and I had
Yep.
done all the description underneath, should I enter that also in Revolut? And then, for instance, my executive summary on my CV, should that also be my intro on LinkedIn?
Yes, is the short answer. Now, the only caveat to that is it may well be that you've been a little more accurate with the numbers on your CV than you might want to publicly put on a profile like LinkedIn, just because you want
Mhm.
to be careful about confidentiality with your current and previous employer's P&L. You know,
Yeah.
but if you've helped them make £5 million and you said in excess of £1 million, you haven't really given the game away there. It's not a lot of competitive insight being gained by anybody who reads your LinkedIn profile, so you think you're safe there. But if you've got accurate numbers, just think twice about publishing them online. And if you want to just dial them down and make them a little bit less accurate and more conservative, just to protect the confidentiality of your kind of previous employer, I think that would be a professional thing to do.
Yeah.
The 5P statement, yeah, that should go on your banner. Just create the graphic and whack it on there, and it should go on your headline. So you get a thing called the headline. It's part of the top section of your LinkedIn profile.
Mhm. Well, people should always go to Fiverr as well to make all those banners. I did the exact same for all my podcasts and stuff, and like you get one
Yeah,
made for like 15 quid and it looks fucking perfect.
yeah. You can go on to canva.com, Canva, canva.com, and they have LinkedIn banner templates sized on there
Nice.
already. And then you can just ship in any graphic you like, and slam with it. And the text is like text editor. It's just literally cut, paste, resize, fonts, colors. I mean, I created my own when I first started on Canva. It was for nothing. And
Mhm.
the reason why you might not want to do that is because you can spend hours. You get sucked into a rabbit hole, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, and before you know it, it's lunchtime, and all I've done is fanning around with a banner. So just don't get sucked into it. All right, just get one up there, get the
Yeah.
text up there, because the hiring manager is going to scroll through loads and loads of LinkedIn profiles that they come up on the search results, and they want this banner to be a scroll stopper. Again, like your email subject line, but it's the same content as the executive summary on your CV. It stops them, makes them read it, and then they'll go, hang on now, I'm going to stop and read the rest of that. And they'll open up
Yeah.
your profile, which is all your banner is going to get them to do. So open your profile and read the rest of it. So give them that 5P statement.
It's a landing page at the end of the day. That's what I
Yeah.
always think, and make sure it's very tailored. One of
Mm.
the questions I had that came out of Instagram was around preparing a CV for international applications.
Yeah.
So I've seen this firsthand. So, I have a CV that's obviously like based out of Ireland and the UK, and like Revolut's a pretty known company in
Yeah.
Europe. But the example that was given was, applying for somewhere in the States. Like,
Yeah.
Revolut's obviously nowhere near the same size as it is in the
Mhm.
UK as it is in the States.
Yeah.
So how would you gear up? Should there be any changes? Now, I don't think there is after what you've described, but should you look at things anywhere differently when you're doing like international applications?
So there are two things there. Well, one is cultural compliance. So in some places around the world, it's appropriate to stick a photo on your CV. We wouldn't do that here in Western Europe or in the States, but certainly in the Middle East, it's quite common. And so if there's any other information that you must put on there, because conventionally they require that kind of factual information. Over here in the West, we don't ask too many personal details, just in case that might be used as prejudice against you. But there are locations around the world where, quite frankly, your marital status or whatever is a necessity. You have to put it on there. And again, I'm thinking of the Middle East. Then there is the whole thing that you were talking about there about Revolut's brand maybe not translating globally, because lots of people's brands don't. They're peculiar to one or two countries. The fact is that if I read Revolut, never heard of them, retail financial services, I understand what they do, product management in excess of 1 million, I can take what you've done and transpose it onto my company, because I know that what you do as a product manager is help me enable revenue growth by £1 million, which is about $1.25 million. And I know kind of roughly what level you play at. You're not a $100 million creator. You're not a $100,000 creator. You're just over 7 figures. Fine. I can slot you into my organization. I understand what that means. So I don't need to know who Revolut are, but without purpose and performance, you're just somebody who cranks out paperwork for a brand I've never heard of. So putting that purpose and performance in elevates it. So basically helps you transcend your job, because you're now actually about enabling revenues. The fact that you do it for revenue is secondary. And so if you ever to move internationally, that purpose and performance language is going to save you.
It's cool. And the last area I wanted to ask, which you kind of brought in there, was around additional information. So, it's not as important, obviously, but as you said there, there's less emphasis on personal details in Europe and the Western world. But how do you think about additional information? Sometimes you see some wacky shit on it, kind of work against you, to be honest.
I'm the other way on this one. I don't think it's not very important. I think it's very important. I think it's a critical part of your CV. For the people I normally help out, the other people that we used to call this hobbies and interests. Nowadays it's called additional information, but it's basically a little bit of an insight into your personal world, things you like to do outside of work. And I would say, rather than just list 2 or 3 things, I like reading, traveling, spending time with my family. Shoot me now, how dull. Give me a short paragraph, a real short paragraph. In story writing, it's called a vignette, but a short paragraph, and tell me a tiny little 1-paragraph story about you. So, for example, on my LinkedIn profile, I don't have a CV, but because I'm not looking for work. But if I ever lifted the information off of my LinkedIn profile and put it into additional information, it would say, I ran a 100-meter race at the London Olympic Stadium in 2012 to raise awareness for charity. Yes, when Usain Bolt turned up a few months later, he went quicker, but for a few months at least, I had bragging rights. You know what? It took me, basically 2 lines to say that, but that's just interesting. And what that does is it humanizes you. It stops you being a 2D CV. And I've read 10 this evening. After work, I'm tired. I've taken a whole load home with me. I've got crap TV going in the background. I'm reading CVs while having a glass of wine. And I can't even remember the name of the person whose CV I'm reading. I just glanced through it for some keywords and stuff. But, I like to go cycling and play chess. And just tell me, give me a reason to stop thinking of you as a 2D CV. I worked with a guy who was transitioning from the military. Obviously, their training is pretty interesting, but he worked for an element of the military that was very forward, very front line. And part of his training was he had to run around in the tunnels of some caves in, I think it was Gibraltar or Malta, I can't remember. And they're pitch black. Once you get into the middle of the hillside, there's just no natural light at all. It absolutely cannot see your hand in front of your face, which is great training for nighttime attacks, etc. It's pitch black. And he was running around all week doing training drills. In the morning, in the middle of the day, and afternoon, etc. And at the end of the week, he basically run the equivalent of a marathon over the course of 5 days in the pitch black, whilst under machine gun fire. Right? Now, I was like, as one of my training exercises, I ran the equivalent of a marathon in the pitch black whilst under machine gun fire. I'm going to get the guy in for an interview just to hear that story. Right, suddenly he's no longer a 2D CV. He's actually a flesh and blood human being. So I think you can use it, that additional information section, to just to make yourself a human, someone who's, we call it a hook. It doesn't have to be funny or particularly amazing. I worked with a guy in IT not known to be the centre of attention, but he raised some money between him and his other CIO pals, and they spent about 12 grand that they raised on buying second-hand IT kit, and they kitted out a classroom of a local school, and then he went and did some teaching there. That tells me a lot about that guy. That, hello there, I'm the CIO, I run big budgets and buy servers and shiny shit for my computer basement. This is something else. This guy's got a little bit more about him. It wasn't the most funny story, or dramatic.
It's just interesting though.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? He's a human being. And I think so. Your additional information section, don't blow that off.
What about this then? So one of the last things I actually forgot about was around side projects or other companies that you may have. So for example, I work in fintech 50 hours a week, but then what I do outside of the work is completely different. So I have a podcast, I have a consulting firm, and I have a career coaching element of kickoff sessions. So in my head, I'm always thinking is that completely irrelevant, or is that relevant because I manage funds, I also have a client base, I manage a backlog of clients, I manage future clients, I also manage episodes and editing and video software. So this is what I'm trying to think about. So what do you think about in terms of people doing other things on the side of their actual main career?
There is two perspectives on that. One is there is the potential for an employer to look at that and say that's a conflict to you spending time and energy working for me. There are other employers who think you're a really well-rounded, interesting human being. You're more our kind of person. From your perspective, I would be looking to exclude those employers who want to interview you, who don't want people like you with their side hustles, because it's just not congruent with your life. You don't want to have to go in on a Monday morning and then hide the fact you were doing something interesting at the weekend, just in case it raises an eyebrow with HR about the fact you have some other income streams. You want to work for a company who wants to champion that and celebrate it, and have interesting people talk about their fun, cool stuff. And so for me, I would go long on it. I'd be very forward with it. I do this. I'd make sure everyone can see it. Because those people who've got a problem with that just aren't going to speak to you. And that's great. Get them out of your life. Everybody else is like, well, we knew all that already. It's not a surprise. In fact, it's something that's pro for us. We like this about our people. That's going to work in your favor, because you're going to end up working at a place who not only just doesn't mind, but chose you because you've got this extra dimension to yourself. And that's the place you want to end up working. So I think I'd use it as I'd be very forward with it. You don't have to hide it, so that's in a nicer light. But also, it just filters out people, and it also filters in. It can be a magnet. It can repel and attract. And so I think use it as a magnet to repel the wrong kind of firm and attract the right kind of firm. There's plenty of jobs out there. There's plenty of companies out there. Why have to live a different life at the weekends and hide it from your boss?
Yeah, it's interesting because that's overall better for creativity. It's more resourceful. You're trying new things and you're learning. Whereas most people in high stressful jobs are at the weekend on the piss. Guys are out on a Friday night, Saturday night. But I'm trying to say is for younger people as well. In that bracket of 20 to 30, that's usually kind of what's happening.
Yeah, my issue isn't so much. I mean, you think it's creative, as it happens. I agree with you, and so do a lot of people. But not everybody does.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
So it's not your opinion that counts. It's the hiring manager's opinion. But what you want to do is just filter out the knuckleheads from ever being a potential hiring manager. You don't want to go and interview at a firm where you have to hide the fact you have this cool extra whole dimension of your life. Actually, you want to be interviewed by a firm that knows that about you and likes that about you. And so that's how you can sort of sift out the employers that are aligned to you versus the employers that are not. I'll give a practical example. In my coaching, as you have heard today on this podcast, occasionally I swear. There are some people, when I was in my exec search career, my investment banking clients didn't even notice. It went straight over their head. Didn't even register with them. I'd be on the trading floor talking about, algo programs and the rest of it, and the language is pretty fruity. When I went to the West End, Mayfair, my private banking clients, all a whole lot more po-faced, they're all wearing Hermes ties and all the rest of it, and the language there did not go down very well. They were not a fan. And so I just learned that actually I'm going to make fewer visits to Mayfair and spend more time in the square mile, where my natural self is something they don't mind and is even valued. And it's the same along with my coaching. There are people out there who need a coach who are going to say, there, never mind, it's going to be okay. Do you know what? It's not going to be fucking okay. You need to put some work in. And some days you will get a hug from me if that's what's necessary. But other days you're going to get my size 10 kick, my size 10 boot up your ass. And if that's not your style, if you don't want that from a coach, best to know that up front and go talk to someone else. I'm not the only career coach on the planet. So And so I think allowing you to be your natural self means that the rest of the market will self-select in or out of your life, which means you end up surrounded by people who like you because you're you. And that's a nice life to live. And you can do that the same with employers, friends. Be your natural self and allow the world to go, yep, or nope. And then you'll be surrounded by people who like you because of you. And that's just a nicer life.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So where can people find you before we wrap up for your new events coming up?
There'll be a whole bunch of links attached to this on the podcast, but starting on Monday, I'm doing a free 5-day accelerator for people to get their jobs. I do them 3 times a year. The next one's coming up soon. So get the link from the podcast notes there. You can get me on LinkedIn, Johnny M. Walker. I had to put the M in, otherwise you just online. You know what? You imagine if I didn't have the M, just try and find me when you Google Johnny Walker. You're just going to get drowned.
I remember that. I remember trying to find your name originally and I couldn't fucking find it.
Yeah, so Johnny M. Walker. Find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me at johnnymwalker.com. Actually, there you go, the egotist in me. I actually have a website named after myself. But so on LinkedIn, on my website, I'm on Facebook. I run several groups on there. I'm all over the place. And in the podcast notes, you'll see the link to a free 5-day accelerator. It's not 5 days. It's like 30 minutes a day for 5 days. So it won't take much out of your life, but it will dramatically improve your performance, your messaging and positioning, and help you get your next job much, much easier. And it's all completely gratis. So help yourself to that.
Awesome. Thank you, Johnny.